Okay. So I am here today to talk to you about conservation advocacy and how to get involved. It can be a scary thing. Um, I totally understand that. I taught high school English for 9 years. I was also the coach of the speech and debate team at the last school I taught at for 3 years. So I am very familiar with helping students, people who are not comfortable with public speaking, to become tolerant, we'll say, of public speaking. To be honest, I greatly dislike public speaking. Every time I get up in front of people, I start to panic a little. My heart feels like it's going to jump out of my mouth. Kind of feel like I might get sick. So, yeah, it has been something that I have learned to tolerate and manage. And at the end of public speaking, I feel super exhilarated. It's totally an adrenaline thing. All of us can relate in as far as buck fever. That's what I would relate it to. You get really nervous and very anxious, you get a little shaky. And once you've done it, it feels great. So, with that being said, a little bit more about who I am. I was an Artemis ambassador for 2 years, and I started that 4 or 5 years ago. And then I have been a Montana Wildlife Federation ambassador for the last year and a half. I, this summer, became a Backcountry Hunters and Anglers Montana board member. I represent the Helena area, and I was so excited for that to come together. And then also this summer, I was hired with Wild Montana, which was formerly the Montana Wilderness Association, as a field organizer. So I stopped my teaching career, which I had done for 9 years, and I moved into the world of conservation. Honestly, it has been a complete dream come true. I am doing what I love every day. It's been an amazing and exhilarating change. All right. So this is some housekeeping because this is for my master's, and I'm collecting data for my master's. I have a consent form. Those of you who are here in person will get those on paper. If you're doing this online, I have a Google form for you, and I will share that shortly. Then we have a pre-assessment. There's not that many questions, I promise. And just answer to the best of your ability. It's pre-assessment. If you get all of them wrong, that's okay. If you get all of them right, totally cool. If you get 10 out of 14, that's not a big deal. Your post-assessment is hopefully going to show that I am a great teacher. I started this master's degree on that note while I was still a teacher, and now I'm no longer teaching. So finding participants was kind of a funky deal. So I appreciate you all coming and doing this for us with BHA and then helping me with my master's. I really appreciate that. So the post-assessment, hopefully it'll show that you learned some things about public speaking, and specifically public speaking as it relates to conservation advocacy. Things that I'm going to cover with you today: speaking during public comment, that can be either in person or Zoom, for legislative hearings, for meetings with the land board, for meetings with oh my gosh. For meetings with the Fish, Wildlife, Parks, Game Commission. There we go. And then we'll talk about how to write a letter to the editor, or an LTE, What is that? How do you write it? And then I do have a slide on how to contact elected officials. Sometimes you want to get together with them and get information before or after, preferably before, but you can always contact them to thank them after, and that shows respect and gratitude. And that's, it's polite. All right. So why did I choose this? Conservation is at a tipping point. The less interested the public is in getting involved, the more we are going to lose. So things like speaking at public hearings, commission meetings, sending our comments into newspapers is exactly how we're going to keep public lands in public hands. And we know that's a big BHA slogan. We see it everywhere. And it's true. We want to keep those public lands in public hands. We want access. We want opportunity. The only way we're going to do that is by speaking up and standing up and showing up to all of these meetings, showing our elected officials that we do pay attention and we do care and we do not want to lose those. So losing access means we're going to lose crucial wildlife habitat. Losing funding means there's no money for conservation. Losing interest as a public means that the elected officials will do what they see fit. If they don't have any interest, if they don't have any input from the public, our democracy is essentially lost. We haven't quite seen that as much at the state level, and I hope that we don't. So that is why I'm doing this. So here we go. All right. Public speaking in person or on Zoom. If you haven't taken the pre-assessment, I'm going to pause this recording. So there'll be like a little chunk, and pause the recording and you can do your pre-assessment. Probably gonna pause it and walk around for like 15 minutes, give them some time, give you some time, although I think it'll just skip. So you might have to just pause this recording. All right, here we go. And we're back. Okay. So if you're public speaking in person or on Zoom, we have the land board. That includes the governor, the attorney general, secretary of state, secretary of public instruction, and the Montana state auditor. You have the FWP commission. They are governor appointees, and there's one from each fish, wildlife, and park region. When it comes to legislative committees and legislative hearings, it depends on the committee. So you need to pay attention to that if you are looking at going to a legislative hearing. When you're at the meeting, there will be an introduction of the issue, and this goes for all of those meetings. They will introduce the issue, the bill, etc. And then they will ask for public comment. Be patient. Usually conservation organizations will have someone there, and they're fairly used to coming up and will get up there very quickly. Once the organizations have gone, start a line toward the back of the room, or the organizations, the folks representing the organizations, I should say, will have already started a line in the back of the room. Sometimes people just go, but don't make it like a weird mad dash to get up there. Just, calmly, professionally walk up and wait your turn. After everybody has given public comment, the board or commission will discuss. They can ask follow-up questions. Usually they're directed at the professionals. So either those who are there for an organization. The only people I've ever heard clarification being requested from at Game Commission and land board meetings has been Fish, Wildlife, and Parks representatives that are there. But if you weren't clear in your statement, they might ask you just a clarification question. If they do, for some reason, ask you a question and you don't know the answer, if there's somebody there who you think might know the answer, you can totally kind of give them a questioning glance and say, do you know? And it's totally okay to just say, I don't know, and to move on. That's okay. Sometimes when the board or commission is discussing amongst themselves, one of them will make a comment that just infuriates you to your core. Do not get back up and argue with them. Do not yell at them from the crowd. You just have to sit there and listen. It can be tough sometimes, absolutely. After they have discussed, they will vote, and after that, they move on to the next issue. So when you are writing down what you're going to say, which I highly recommend, not just jumping up to take off and start talking, you need to include who you are addressing. So if you're at the land board, you're going to say Governor Gianforte and members of the land board, Madam Chair, members of the commission, Senator blank, Representative blank, members of the blank committee, etc. It'll depend on who you are speaking to and where you are, which meeting you're at. If you are in person or on Zoom, this gets a little different here. If you're in person, you just wait for public comments to be announced and asked for. If you're on Zoom, they will let you in to speak going down just the line. They will ask if anybody is online. The person running it will answer in the affirmative or the negative, and then they'll go from there. Order of speaking, I kind of just covered that. You address the titles of those who are present. Then you state your name and spell your last name at the very least. They keep a record, so you need to make sure that you are spelling your last name. And then you are going to state who you're representing, unless you've been asked to represent an organization. You just say that you're representing yourself. So for example, Governor Gianforte, members of the land board, my name is Ann Jolliffe, Jolliff, and I am here representing Montana backcountry hunters and anglers. And then you would go on to what your comment is. So when you're crafting your comments, you're going to have your introduction, you'll address your members, state your name, who you're representing. Then you need to clearly present your position. I support whatever, or I oppose whatever, preferably followed by the bill number and title. Doesn't have to be that way. Doesn't have to be that formal. It does help when they are keeping records. Then you are going to share some tiny little snippet of a story that pertains to this issue. So why do you care? What is the connection? Why are you there? Why did you take time out of your day to talk about this specific issue that you're there to talk about? Then you're going to talk about the threat. What do we lose if this passes or doesn't pass? So that's going to go back to your support or your opposition. If it doesn't pass, what are we going to lose? If it does pass, what are you gaining or losing? You know, it just depends on the issue and the support. Okay, and then you're going to give a solution. What do we gain if this passes or doesn't pass? Okay, so a solution could be, please keep this as is. I don't want it to change. We need this funding. Okay. Call to action. I urge you to remember Montanans voted on this particular issue. We want it to stay that way. Okay. Okay. So because that can get a little muddy and weird, I included a video.
To continue for pieces. Madam Chair.
Thank you. And from what I understood what you said, a lot of the initial funding will be to get the program set up. So that's, I guess, to me, tough to divide that by a bird when you're very first setting up a program. I mean, you'd have to wait till the 5 years are over, I think, to truly get a true cost. Is there anyone?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay, go ahead.
I move that the Fish and Wildlife Commission approve the release of pheasants on state-owned lands for calendar years 2022 to 2026 as proposed by the department.
Second. Would you like to add to your motion for a yearly update?
Yes, Madam Chair, and I hadn't written that down yet. So let me restate my motion. I move that the Fish and Wildlife Commission approve the release of pheasants on state-owned lands for calendar years 2022 to 2026 as proposed by the department, and and also request or require an annual report to the commission on both satisfaction and profit. Agreed.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Are there any other questions before I go out to the public for comment? Okay. Is there anyone present who would like to speak to this motion?
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the commission. My name is Thomas Baumeister. I'm the vice chair, volunteer vice chair for the Montana chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. Really very much appreciate the conversation here. And I'd like to just draw your attention to the fact that the statute says may. It does not say shall, meaning that the department is not obligated to invest $1 million into raising pheasants and putting them out on the land. If that was the case, then you wouldn't have to have, this discussion this morning and to be thinking about whether or not to approve or disapprove the release. It does not say shall. And there are lots of reasons, and I don't want to go into a point counterpoint with Deb O'Neill, although we agree fundamentally on every point that was raised. I used to be the R3 coordinator for Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks for many, many years. It's wishful thinking to sort of put thousands of birds in the landscape and somehow sort of magically turn these teenage girls and boys into hunters. It sounds good, it feels good. Folks, it doesn't work. It takes a lot more to recruit hunters, to retain hunters. So I urge you in your decision-making space, and I really appreciate Commissioner Wallace, raising some questions about, money spent. And I agree, you don't have the authority this morning to redirect these funds, but you do have the authority to say, no, let's go back to the drawing board. Let's send those dollars back to the legislature, to the general fund. Let's talk about what we can do as far as public access. Let's enroll more properties into block management, set them aside for some young hunters. There are lots of willing landowners out there. Let's put some shelter belts out there. Montana is the last best place to hunt wild birds. With that, we just urge you to just exercise your decision making. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any further commenters? Okay. Do we have anyone online?
Yes, Madam Chair. First, we have Christina Gaylor.
Okay, I just want to remind everyone there's a 2-minute time limit. And Jasmine, do we have somebody taking care of that? Okay, thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Christina Gaylor. I live in Colorado, Livermore. I am a frequent visitor in Yellowstone National Park and all over in Montana and Wyoming. And I'm opposing the whole wolf hunting trapping plan.
Okay, that's not the motion that is on the table right now. We're talking about pheasants, so that will be later in our agenda.
I apologize.
Okay.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, next we have Chuck Alvarez.
Okay, thank you. Mr.
Charlie Osborne. I'm an outfitter, been here for 30 years here in Colorado. Pheasant hunting is very important for the sustaining of families and the health of biodiversity. And I just want to say what you're doing right now is good for pheasant control and population. I just want to say that you guys are doing the right thing, and I hope to God everybody listens and understands what it's about when it comes to hunting. I've been a hunter and a guide for almost 35 years, and Commissioner Walsh, I suit up every day, and you're here every day. But I want you to know that pheasants are very important in biodiversity, and thank you for helping control that and populate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, next we have Marilyn Marler.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I have an audio issue here. Bear with me. Thank you. My name is Marilyn Marler.
And we
I'm a
can,
hunter and a state representative from Missoula. I served on the House Fish and Wildlife Committee last session. I've also previously served on the Upland Game Advisory Board, and I currently serve on the Environmental Quality Council, or the EQC. I'm speaking today to urge the Commission to please vote no on the motion. Just because the funds are budgeted for this biennium does not mean that you have to vote to spend it. I'm urging you to please be fiscally responsible and vote no. I appreciate Ms. O'Neill's presentation, and I don't disagree with many of her fine points. I've discussed my concerns with Ms. O'Neill before, and I appreciate the chance to share with the Commission now. Although this is presented as a legislative directive, as a legislator, I can tell you that this idea came from the director's office. This was included in a so-called housekeeping bill 637 that had a lot of things in it, and was included at the specific request of the director's office. The legislature could alter or omit the funding next session. Allocating $1 million to a new program is not a housekeeping issue. This new program is well-meaning.
we have a 2-minute time limit, and so your time is up. I let you go a little bit longer just because it took a little bit to get going, but
I
thank
thought
you.
we had 2 minutes.
Yes, and you did.
Okay, thank you.
You.
Madam Chair, next we have William Gear.
Sure. For today's meeting, when we start, could you let me know at the beginning how many people we have to speak? Would that be possible?
Absolutely, Madam Chair. As just information, we have 1 left after this.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Gear. Mr. Gear, you look like you're unmuted. Now you're muted. Yep, go ahead. We still can't hear.
Madam Chair, I think they might need to attach a microphone or a pair of headphones that have a microphone attached. Because maybe what device they're using, the microphone is malfunctioning.
Okay. I'll give you just one more chance to have our audio, and then we're going to have to move on.
Hear me now?
Okay, we can. Go ahead.
Well, thank you. Thank you for reminding me to hook up the microphone. I apologize. I agree with Mr. Balmaster and Marilyn Marler, so that will condense my comments a little bit and save you some time. But I would also like to add that I'm a former Fish and Wildlife biologist, retired. We addressed this about 40 some odd years ago in Utah Division of Wildlife Resources. And we find that pheasant releases were not an effective or desirable means to introduce youth to hunting. It became a put and take program in reality, nothing more than target practice, and doesn't teach the values of fair chase hunting that lead to long-term investment in and passion for hunting.
and wildlife conservation. We think that the program is fiscally irresponsible, and we realize there's a legislative intent here, but I recommend that that they fight for the $1 million allocation in the future, but the money be reallocated to legislative change, not for put and take can pheasant hunting. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, last we have Mike Mershon.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, thank you for your guys' time and your conversation surrounding our 3 efforts. I just wanted to bring up a few concerns because the program monitoring has got to be identified to assess our return on investment for taxpayers, along with the methods to determine long-term R3 effectiveness, along with HB 637 not allowing the redirection of this money towards proven habitat work. I'm recommending that the Commission not approve the release of pen-raised pheasants. Thank you.
Thank you. Chance to comment? Okay. All right, are there any questions or comments before we go to a vote? Commissioner Byron?
Thanks, Madam Chair. There are some great intent around the program, including, recruitment of young hunters, I think is important. But I think this is the wrong approach. I feel like we're going down a road that Montana, bravely turned away from back as early as the 70s. And I heard some assurances in Ms. O'Neill's presentation that this was not the trajectory of the department. It was heartening to hear that the Director's Office hopes to introduce legislation to redirect some of the other open bird money to habitat. But I just am opposed to this because of the slippery slope of creating the impression that stalking hatchery reared pheasants or trout is the way to sustain our hunting heritage in Montana. We are one of the only states that relies almost strictly on wildlife in wild places, and I don't want to see us turn away to become like other states that I think don't offer the same benefits that we do.
Thank you. Any other comments? Commissioner Siebel?
Madam Chair, just I appreciate the comments on this, and I do want to say that I agree with one of the commentators online that we are looking for a return on investment, and I think that's going to be our part to really determine what that is for this. And that's why, as part of my motion, I made the recommendation number 1 that we have that annual report, both on satisfaction, which is going to be part of the way that we determine the return, and also on the cost per bird, see if we're getting good bang for our dollars for the million a year that's allocated. I think from my perspective, I've planted birds, I hunted over planted birds. I planted birds for population augmentation. I've hunted over planted birds on different hunts. And I don't think the program that was in the 70s, we can't relate, I was born in the 70s, can't relate to kids today necessarily. And I'm willing to do, I think this is a great idea, targeted on these wildlife management areas, targeted at youth hunts. So I'm going to support the motion, and just want to say that, but we have to be really careful and really thorough about measuring these results. And I want to make sure that we get that report every year. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any other further comments before I go out to a vote? Okay. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Motion.
Okay, so I really liked that little chunk for lots of reasons. I didn't include the Fish, Wildlife, and Parks commentary at the beginning. However, we are probably all fairly familiar with the idea of planting pen-raised pheasants, as that has been something that was talked about for quite a while before the Commission voted on it. And now that it's upland bird season, I'm sure some of you are out there finding those birds. So there were a few things I really liked about that. Number 1, I mean, we had Thomas speaking, so that's awesome. Those of you who don't know who Thomas is, he's one of our BHA members. As you heard, he's vice chair, volunteer vice chair. And he is an awesome person to get in contact with if you don't understand some of the issues. He's very well versed in all of it. And then we got to see how it worked with Zoom comments. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Also, make sure that you register for the correct issue, as you saw. There have been times, so 2 of those people were from Colorado, where things are so contentious, they only want Montanans to speak on it. So that can also be a thing, but make sure your equipment is ready to go so that you don't miss out on your time. Make sure that your comments are 2 minutes or less. Practice, practice, practice. They don't have to be memorized by any means, but make sure that you're not going off on side tangents that aren't in your notes. And make sure that you practice to make sure that it is 2 minutes or less. They are very strict on that, especially on the Fish and Wildlife Commission. Okay, next up, haha, I want you to practice. So this is just an example, but I want you to write public comment in regards to losing funding for Habitat Montana. So Habitat Montana, if you don't know, helps fund many programs, including conservation easements, and including, let's see, I'm fairly certain that Habitat Montana is part of our matching funds that we were using against Pittman-Robertson to purchase. Oh my gosh, I just spoke on this. The crazies, the piece of the crazies that the state of Montana was purchasing from Shodair. So it can be a state used fund to match in regards to conservation and state lands. So it's a pretty big deal. Habitat Montana funds are very necessary. And during the last legislative session, I-90 was passed giving a certain amount of tax from recreational marijuana going toward Habitat Montana. So let's just say that there's a bill introduced to redirect funding to something else. You pick if you want to be specific: education, rehab programs. I don't know what else. You pick. It can be something totally crazy. This is just practice. And then theoretically, you go to a legislative meeting to speak on the bill. So you need your introduction, your story, your threat, your solution, and your call to action. If you are watching this as a recording, go ahead and pause it right now so that you can take time to write some notes, do a little research, maybe practice talking a couple times. I'm going to pause it here so that those who are here have time. Maybe. There we go. Okay, pause that. And I'll come back in probably about 15 minutes. Okay. So these were the comments that I read at the last board meeting, land board meeting. There we go. So up at the top, it says Governor Gianforte and members of the land board. My name is Ann Jolliffe, and I'm here today representing the Montana chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. We've been in favor of this project every step of the way since it was first in front of the commission in 2020. It has overwhelming public support, including unanimous approval from the Fish and Wildlife Commission. It's paid for with sportsman's license dollars, but primarily with out of Montana federal monies generated from Pittman-Robertson. It's in an area where increasing and adding public access and hunting opportunity can only help neighboring landowners with elk issues. And finally, we have a willing and incredibly generous seller here who wants to see this property open to the public and protected in perpetuity, a situation that doesn't come along very often. We simply cannot let this opportunity pass us by. We appreciate and look forward to celebrating your support. Thank you. Always important to end with something positive. Even if we didn't think this was going to pass, saying we appreciate and look forward to celebrating your support. Thank you is very important. Okay. So just some general information. research. If you don't read the bill or understand the content, reach out to somebody who can help you. I should say if you can't read the bill, because honestly, some of the legal language in the bills trips me up. And I need somebody who can help me out. For our purposes, for BHA's purposes, reach out to somebody in a conservation organization. There are so many. If you're part of BHA, there's people who are so willing to help you and would be so excited that you are willing to come talk. You wouldn't be there speaking necessarily representing BHA, but we're totally willing to help you out so that you feel comfortable and you're not going to go up there and sound like an idiot. That's what we're here for. 2 minutes is usually the max. If there's a crowd, they're super strict on this, as you just saw in that video. You need to dress like you're going to an interview for your career, business attire. Don't, wear wholly ripped jeans and your worst shoes. I will say there have been certain groups who show up in interesting clothing. Wear what you are representing. I will leave it at that. Make sure you double check location, time, and the bills being addressed at these meetings. These can all change very last minute. This is a teacher recommendation. Eat. Don't go in hungry. Even if you feel nauseous, like I usually do, eat something and be well hydrated. It's entirely possible that you're going to get up there and you're going to feel kind of lightheaded and weird. That's your blood sugar kind of panicking. Well, your body panicking and your blood sugar going down. So I highly recommend eating something. It helps with everything. And then you can and should send up a follow-up thank you note to the members. It shows respect. It shows, that you're paying attention and you appreciate the work they're doing. Even if the vote doesn't go your way, maybe even especially if the vote doesn't go your way. It's just, it's polite. Couple extra do's and don'ts. Do show up. Even if you have to bring your kids. I brought my kids to my first land board meeting and everybody was in awe. It was kind of funny. They totally had their tablets because I knew that if they didn't have those, they would get bored and annoyed really fast. Do what you got to do. Sitting in the back so you can sneak out after the issue. If you're only there for one issue is a good idea. If you do have your kids, that is. Or if you don't have time. I mean, if you have to do this and you're using it as like your lunch hour, even if it's in, 10 o'clock in the morning, you can totally sneak out. But do show up. It's so important just to show up. Do be concise. There's usually the short amount of time. I can't stress this one enough. Don't rant during your speech. If you get up there and you are personally attacking officials, which goes to the next one, you're personally attacking the director of any kind of department, you're personally attacking another group, it's just going to come off bad. Highly recommend don't rant during your speech. Absolutely show passion, but control your emotions. I think Randy Newberg actually said something very similar to that on one of his podcasts. That kind of got me interested in conservation advocacy to begin with. So thank you, Randy. Okay, we're going to move on to a letter to the editor, which should be a lot shorter because it's almost the same format. So what is a letter to the editor? It's a letter showing your support or opposition for anything in the community. I have written letters to the editor on the Lincoln Prosperity Proposal, Habitat Montana, Deb Haaland, community events, etc. Most newspapers have a form on their website. Some papers don't run these anymore. Find one close to you that does. I want to say Great Falls doesn't have letters to the editor anymore. They do have op-eds, which are longer. And I'm not actually 100% sure how to approach that one. I don't know if you email their editor. That's a good question. Anyway, I know Helena in IR has a form online. I think the Butte Standard does as well. I'm fairly certain I've sent them to both of those. And I'm pretty sure the Bozeman Daily Chronicle does also. But double check. And if there's like a contact us and they don't, feel free to contact them and ask them how to do such things. So in content, very similar to a speech, you have your story, your threat, your solution, your call to action, and it's about 200 to 300 words. So this is just an example of one that I wrote. This one's actually more on a community event, so it doesn't quite follow the story, threat, solution, call to action. In a way it does, it's just not as concise in following that outline. But yesterday, so this I wrote when I was teaching high school still, 9 Jefferson High School students attended the Montana Game Commission meeting at the Capitol building in Helena. The issues were far less contentious than the last commission meeting, but 2 students felt compelled to speak on issues presented at the meeting. It may seem out of place for high school students to attend policy meetings. However, they're perhaps the most important voices and are rarely heard. Teenagers have a larger stake in policy than most, as the laws and regulations put forth directly impact their future, and they will be here with the repercussions longer than many of us. Youth involvement is imperative to their future. Our community should support and create opportunities for them. These students are part of a class called Outdoors Literacy at JHS, which focuses on bolstering reading comprehension using hands-on experiences that students read about in various novels. The current reading material, That Wild Country by Mark Kenyon, focuses on the public lands access provided through conservation policy through America's history. While it is a unique class, it would aid students in many ways to have more like it around the state. Okay. So that is just an example. Okay. Contacting officials directly. So why would you want to do that? You can do it as a follow-up from hearings. You can do it for specific bills. Make sure you know the number and content before you go there. I can't stress it enough. Don't go and waste their time. They have so much going on. There's a 90 days in the session in Montana, and the amount of bills and hearings and meetings that these people have is astronomical. Contacting your officials directly is most effective at a local and state level. Usually if you send an email to our officials in Washington, D.C., you get a very canned response. It's usually the same response. It's just a fill in the name. Sometimes you will get an actual response from a staffer, but typically it's just a canned response. So, right. So it's most effective at the local and state levels. You're going to get a response more than likely. Call the office to make an appointment with a staffer, which is very common, or the official if it's possible. Like I said, 90-day session, and it's crazy. So they might set you up with a staffer. Always confirm your appointment with a phone call the day before. Like I said earlier, things change very quickly. Next, do your research, know their stance, have a summary typed with your contact info to leave there. Leave your notes. Like, it's okay. That way, if they're like, oh, this person who came in, I can't remember their name. I know they said something I thought was really impactful. They have that and they can look back. And then once again, send a thank you. It really honestly does show good faith. It's a good thing to do. I'm sure we have all, as children, probably written a thank you note for a gift we really hated. So we have practice, you know. Okay. I think we have resources and then that's it. So how do you even know what's being debated? Where do you even start? Follow conservation organizations on social media or get their email lists. Do this based on what's important to you. Like I said, I am a board member for BHA. I'm an ambassador for Montana Wildlife Federation, and I work for Wild Montana. So obviously those are the 3 that popped into my mind. And then I'm a member of Helena Hunters and Anglers. but there are so many options out there. Find a group that you kind of jive with. If you don't know any groups, check with other people. Wild Montana has chapters in Bozeman, Butte, Billings, Great Falls, and Helena. So even organizations might have smaller chapters, might be broken out into different little bits and pieces. Next, keep an eye on the Land Board and Commission web pages, as well as the legislative dockets pages. All of these are available on Montana government pages. Just quick Google search and it'll take you right there. If you need more help, reach out to those organizations. Many have people who can help you, either paid staff, board members, or other volunteers. Like I said, find an organization and a group that you jive with, join up, become a member, ask for help. It really is important. And it's why all these organizations exist. Hopefully this helped you to feel more confident in putting together your comments, either spoken or written. I know sometimes it is terrifying to get up there and speak. I really do understand. But if we don't show up, we're gonna lose everything we're fighting for. Because if we don't show up, we're not really fighting. So I encourage you to reach out. I encourage you to speak up and show up. And if you have questions or need help, get a hold of us. All right. Thank you so much for your time. If you are doing this during my master's and you would like to take the post test now, that would be fabulous. So those of you who are here in the building with me, I will pass that out. And then you can take that test. And yeah, we'll go from there. Your data isn't shared. It doesn't go anywhere. It's literally just me giving numbers, no names. All right. Thank you again. I appreciate it. Have a great night.